Okay, let's get started. I'm going to open up the brand new SketchUp file. I'm going to leave the default scale figure in place because I think it's important to keep a scale figure in place. You can always bring your own in at a later point. We'll work on that later. Um, but it'll be good to demonstrate how the scale figure remains the same size as we adjust the size of the plan. And I think this will all make sense in a second, so why don't we get to it? All right. We're going to import this plan. We've done this before in the first class for SketchUp. We worked on bringing a plan in as a material. This time what we're going to do is we're going to bring a plan in as a JPEG, and we're going to leave it a JPEG and let it stay its own element. So I'm going to go to File, Import, and I'm going to navigate to wherever it is I've placed the pool building plans. So I have a document called Plan for Model. If I'm not able to click on this, it's probably because the format I have not checked JPEG. Sometimes the default is SketchUp or PNG. Hold on one second. So if for some reason I'm not able to click on this, you might want to check and make sure that you're importing the right kind of format. So I'm going to switch this back to JPEG. And also, use as image should be selected as well. So it should be default that it goes to that, but just make sure that you've got the format as JPEG and use as image as the selected option. Now I can go to pool building. I want to go to the plan for model. I want to go to the one that's enlarged, that's a lot cleaner as opposed to the full one. That's a little too much information. This is good to look at on the side if I want, but the for model is really where I want to be. So go ahead and import that. I'll start at the origin point just for the sake of making it nice and easy. I'm going to click once on that origin point, and then as I drag my mouse, hand off the left click, I'm just clicking once to start, and then I'm going to click again once to stop. And in fact, I'm going to keep this nice and small because I want this to be really obvious. Clearly, the model is way bigger than this. The actual space is a lot bigger than this. And my scale figure lets me know that I'm way off here in terms of size. But there's a nice little trick that we can do using the tape measure, where we use the tape measure to actually scale an object up to become exactly the size we want it to be, especially if we have some points we already know about. Let's take a look at our plan for a second. We have quite a bit of information in terms of dimensions that actually show us really, really good information. We've got from this point to this point is a nice clean 20 feet. So we've got a little 20-foot kind of grid rhythm being established. We've got some smaller dimensions here as well. I'm gonna stick with this 20-foot dimension because it's nice and clean. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna use my line tool, and I've got a shortcut set up for that. So I'm gonna hit L for line. I'll be using shortcuts throughout this course. And of course, you can always reference back to the shortcut lecture video that I made for the regular SketchUp class. But just to save some time, I'll be referencing shortcuts a lot. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to get, notice I've also got my crosshairs enabled. I want to get nice and close and pretty much center myself on this dot. You'll notice that it's a fuzzy image, and that's kind of the default that happens no matter how high res an image you bring into SketchUp. It kind of fuzzies it up a little bit. That's so that it can move quickly while you're working. It's okay. We're not going to be ever looking at this plan outside of this program, and it's not going to need to print nicely anyway. So let me go ahead and click once to start a line. And I'm not going to measure 20 feet because as I scroll across, you'll see up here in my length dialog box, it's telling me that I really only have, this is about 2 foot, 2 9/16 of an inch. If you're working on a PC, your dialog box is probably down here. But as I scroll across, I'm not even focused on what that dialog box says. I'm only focused on clicking another line, or clicking another point here to end that line. And now I'm going to hit escape to just end the line. So what I've done is I've made a line that sits on top. You can see that in blue. It sits on top of this point to point. And this line should be 20 feet in order for this to be an accurate plan. Right now it's way too small. What you can do is you can take your tape measure tool and you can start from one point of that line and click to the next point of that line. I'm not even worried again about the fact that it says 2 foot 2 and 9/16. I'm going to click again, and now I'm going to type immediately after 20 feet, enter. And what that's going to do is bring up a dialog box that says, do you want to resize the model? Note the components within the model that were loaded from external files will not be resized. The answer to that question is yes, enter. So now it's obviously made the entire plan way bigger. I'm going to zoom back. There's my scale figure that I had originally in the model. So this is when it referenced that components that were brought in from other models will not be resized. She was not resized. She remained the same size that she already is. So if I measure the top of her head down to the bottom of the floor, she's about 5 foot 4 inches tall. Go ahead and hit escape. But if I come back and I measure this point to this point, now I've got a perfectly clean 20 feet. So this JPEG should now be nicely to scale. It's not going to be to scale in the way a CAD drawing would be to scale because there's nothing to actually reference here. All of this is, there's nothing to reference in terms of points and lines. There is plenty of information for us to see visually. I can see that this point, if I click a dimension from here, from this point to this point, I can see that that should be about 5 feet. And let me test that by typing 5 feet, enter. Pretty clean. Again, we're looking at a really blurry line here. So this is all relatively helpful for us. We're still going to use a lot of these dimensions that they've included as reference points, but we're not going to we're not going to get the ability to click from point to point within this drawing. This drawing is just a good reference for us. It's sitting on the bottom of the floor, and this is what we're going to be able to use to draw the entire model, or at least to get the plan in there. I don't need this line anymore, so I can go ahead and select it and delete it. Now what I want to do is, because this is kind of a unique element, I want to be able to turn this plan off and on as I see fit. So I'm going to go ahead and move this plan onto its own layer. We're not going to get really crazy layer happy in this file at this point. Eventually we'll add a lot more layers. We're not going to worry about things like layers for doors, layers for windows, walls. That's much more an architectural drawing device. That's something that you'll probably do in CAD or another 2D design drawing program. We don't want to get too nuts with layers, but we do want to establish this on its own layer right at the beginning. Whenever I'm working on a big model and I know that I've got something that I want to turn off and on right away, I'm going to go ahead and make its own layer. So I'll pull up the layer window by going to Window, Layers, or I've got a shortcut which is Shift L, and I'm going to hit the plus sign and I'm going to make a new layer, all caps, called Plan. I always make all of my own layers in all caps because I want to know that I've made it, and a lot of layers that people make on their own components that you might bring in from the warehouse will be in lowercase or have numbers or all sorts of other weird conventions. I like to just keep my model nice and clean. I know I've made it if I put it on the plan, if I make it in all caps. Okay, so that's step one. I've made a layer in which I can put this, on which I can put this plan. Step two, pull up my window entity info box. Okay, and that's right here. My shortcut for that is Shift E. All right. This is, and you can even say that the entity info is letting me know a few things. It's letting me know how big this is, how tall it is, some of this other information that doesn't matter right now, the name of the file that I got to bring it in, which is pool building plan. That's all good to know, but really the reason I wanted to open this up is because I want to select this and I want to drag this onto the plan layer. It has to be selected in order to do that, of course. So if it's unselected, the entity info box isn't going to tell me anything. So I've got this selected. I make sure it's on the plan layer, and then I just do a quick double check to make sure that without fail it happened, and I go ahead and turn the plan layer off and on. Something I want to note before we wrap up this little portion of the video is that I always want layer 0 to be active. I'm always on layer 0, working on layer 0, which means the little bubble right next to the layer 0 name should always be checked as active. Everything that we make, we're going to make on layer 0. And when we want to move it to a different layer, we can go ahead and do that in the future. So we can always move to as many layers as we want, but we want to start out by making everything on layer 0. Okay, so this is great. We've got a good little start here. Our plan is able to turn off and on, and now we can start getting into the meat and potatoes of building this model. So let me go ahead and edit, delete guides, and then we will launch into the beginning of making the model in our next video.